Okay, Dave, if you want to get started.
Okay, here goes the old National Geographic globe spinning. It does have the breakup of the Soviet Union, but not much after that. So it's not an antique. Here we go. Whoa. Hawaii. Right on Hawaii.
Okay, so who's been to Hawaii?
Oh, come on, I'm not the only one. Okay.
Cheryl?
No, it's beautiful if you haven't had the chance to go. It's the first time I went, my company sent me there to man a booth at a convention, and it was weird. Nobody else wanted to go. It's like you get a free week in Hawaii. Why is nobody going? But it is absolutely wonderful. It is everything the pictures say it is. I went back later with my husband and we got to see one of the volcanoes erupting. So I highly recommend it to anybody.
Maureen, you want to add a short story?
Yes, I've been to Hawaii a couple of times many years ago because I used to live in Fairbanks, Alaska. And Fairbanks and Alaska and Hawaii actually have a special relationship because they're the 49th and 50th state. And so there's direct flights from Alaska to Hawaii, and a lot of people go and vacation there. So I had the opportunity and I did see the volcano, and I went to several of the islands, and it is, I agree, it's a beautiful place, and I'd love to go back.
All right, well, why don't we get one more quick story from Pat Burke, and then we'll spin the globe again and go somewhere else.
Yeah, I've been to Hawaii twice. The first time, of course, you have to see all the sights, Waikiki Beach and the Pali Cliffs and the Polynesian Village, and of course you have to do a luau. And my friend that I was with, we were at the luau, and at the end of the luau, all of the people that came on the buses started stealing the pineapple centerpieces off of all of the tables. And it was like, oh my God. And the second time I went, we did a snorkeling adventure off the coast. And I think this was in Maui. And the diver went down and got sea urchins off the seafloor. It's only about 25 or 30 feet deep, and brought them up, and we got to see live sea urchins. And that was quite interesting. I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been with an adventurous friend, but I'd love to go again. Both of those adventures were just wonderful memories. It's beautiful there.
Okay, Dave, why don't you give the globe another spin and see where we end up?
Okay, this time I'm going to aim roughly for the southern hemisphere.
Okay.
And this is a very ethnocentric globe. It's hard to get to the southern hemisphere. It features our hemisphere. Here we go. Whoa. Okay, that's in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So there's lots of islands there, but of course it borders on India and East Africa, Mozambique, Southeast Asia. So somebody's been to some of those places, I'll bet.
Anybody been sailing in the Indian Ocean or somewhere in East Africa?
I went to the Maldives a couple of times, and I found it delightful, but so far off that it wasn't. I can't say it was a disappointment, but I'd already been to Hawaii, so in a way, I kind of enjoyed Hawaii a little more. But anyway, it was an experience. I enjoyed it.
Good. Anybody else?
Gary, may I say something about that?
Yep.
Okay, and we were invited to bring show and tell, right? So I went to the Indian Ocean on an all expenses paid cruise, courtesy of the US Navy. And we went to several places. And it was during peacetime, so it was very peaceful, very, very hot, actually. On this Navy ship, we made a port call at Karachi, and that was fun. They threw a couple of parties for us, and we met our counterparts in the Pakistani Navy. And we had a lot of other adventures, some of which I probably shouldn't tell anybody, but that was my experience in the Indian Ocean. I did not get to go as a tourist to the Maldives or anything like that, but that just shows a variety of travel.
Okay, well, why don't you give us a Northern Hemisphere location this time?
Whoa. Okay, the Caspian Sea. And that borders, it's bordered by Iran, I think Turkey, and Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Russia.
All right. Well, I've been to Turkey, which was a fascinating place. We were there right before it began its slide into, autocratic leadership. But it's one of those countries with thousands of years of history. And one of the things that we saw there, we went to the ruins of the capital of the Hittite kingdom. And there was this huge green stone that had been carved into a cube about 3 feet on a side. And they said there was one other in the world like that. And it had been given by the king of the Hittites to the pharaoh in Egypt as a present. It's like, I had no idea these guys were, BFFs at that time. But you realize how interconnected they all were. And I see Jim's got his hand up. Unmute Jim and tell us your story.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Well, I've been to Turkey as well, Gary, but I think perhaps the more interesting experience I had was Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. I went to Uzbekistan on business, and I took a side trip personally to Samarkand. The business was in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and Samarkand is an ancient city that's quite famous. And on the way, passed through like a 10-kilometer strip of Kazakhstan on the way to Samarkand. But Samarkand was quite amazing. It was just a beautiful old ancient city. And this road we traveled on the way is really the old Silk Road, part of it. So that's my story.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Oh, Cheryl.
I went to, this was, I don't know how many years ago, but I, of course, am in the health field and went to 5 of the, I was looking, when you said Russia, when Russia still had all of the USSR, I and other health professionals went to 5 of the USSR provinces. There was Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and I cannot think of the 5th one, but it was very interesting visiting the hospitals of these 5 provinces, including Russia, and seeing how their healthcare systems worked. And it was quite an interesting visit to compare how the health system was as compared to the United States. But I also remember coming into Moscow. That was how we got there, and remembering when you were came into the airport and the person who looked at your passport would look at you and look at the passport. And it was a little intimidating initially to be in the, to come into Moscow. You kind of were hoping that nothing bad would happen while you were there, but it was an enlightening experience. But I have to say, when I got back home, I just really wanted to kiss the ground because I realized what it's like to, visit countries where the government is far different than what we're used to, particularly as we think about yesterday being Independence Day.
Good. All right, Dave, how about giving us another spin?
Gary, is the USA fair game?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll see.
Virginia's probably not. We should probably skip that, but
Okay. Well, this is in the North Atlantic near Iceland.
okay. So who's been to Iceland? Nope. So how about Liz? You're muted, Liz.
I thought I'd gotten that button. Okay. Basically, right after 9/11, I had been with a group of people who sing in Gaelic, and we were going to the National Mod, which was being held on the Isle of Lewis in the Hebrides. And we took an Iceland Air flight. And the big thing about Iceland Air is wherever you're going, they stop in Reykjavik for a couple hours, and all you can do is buy stuff. So they let you into this great big duty-free shop at 3 a.m, and you're jet lagged and you're tired, and that's the only game going. So I have these memories of just looking out a window, and they have this, it looked like the lunar landscape or Mars or something. It was really a strange and bizarre landscape, and I've always meant to go back because it was such an evocative thing. It was like walking into a science fiction story. One of these days I'll get there, but I have touched my feet in Iceland.
Lori Rogers, did you have your hand up? You've got to unmute yourself. I guess not. I see Anita Walgren has joined us. Anita, you got a short story?
Yeah, it was a great week. I just did Iceland Arctic Adventure in March this year, and it was fabulous. And I agree, Liz, it's like being on another planet. But it's still familiar enough for me growing up in Michigan to feel like it was sort of, it seemed like a combination of desert landscape and northern Michigan, and it was just a really interesting place, and I'd really recommend it for everybody. I learned so much, and I have unfortunately forgotten almost all of it, but it was just fascinating about glaciers, geothermal heating, and it was a big adventure, so great deal.
Lori, did you want to add a story?
I wanted to just say we're going to Iceland next week.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm going with friends from college, so we'll have an interesting time. But I've been there 2 or 3 times before. We've done the Golden Circle, which you see the major sites, and learn that Iceland is on the border of 2 plates. And it slips now and then. So they are subject to earthquakes, volcanoes. But it's a beautiful place. I agree with the previous speaker. It's just beautiful. And the people are nice, and the food is good, and you should all go to Iceland.
All right. Well, Dave, why don't you give us a Southern Hemisphere destination?
I'll be glad to. I see a couple of hands, but up to you. Southern Hemisphere. Okay. I should have a close observer here, Gary, to make sure I'm not putting some spin on my choices.
Unintended.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Wow. Okay, that's pretty close to Antarctica.
All right, who's been on a cruise to Antarctica? Nobody? How about the southern tip of South America? Oh, I see Maureen's hand is up.
Can you go?
Yep.
So just last January, Elisa and I took a cruise that went from Santiago, Chile, down around the Cape Horn and through the Straits of Magellan, and I think it's called the Beagle Channel down there, and it was just marvelous. We saw, glaciers going from the mountain right into the sea, and we were really lucky because the day that we went through the straits, it was beautiful weather, and so we were able to see the mountain peaks and the glaciers and all the gorgeous scenery, and some of the crew members said, that they had been on that trip many times and they had never seen it because it tends to be socked in, and an interesting story, just like a week or 10 days before we were there, it was in the news that a rogue wave came and hit a cruise ship that was there and damage it. They had to end the cruise, and actually a couple people died who were on the level that got hit by the wave. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think we're going there. And we did go to that port, but when we were there, it was just a beautiful day. So we were very lucky. And it was probably one of the most interesting and different things that I've done. And then we went back up and we ended in Buenos Aires. So that was quite a trip.
All right, Jim, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, on one of my trips to Argentina, I flew all the way down to Ushuaia, which is the on the most southernmost tip of Argentina. And that was interesting, but more interesting was a little north of there, all the ice rivers and the glacier areas. Absolutely beautiful, just stunning in their beauty.
We went to Ushuaia, Jim.
Cool.
We went to Ushuaia on our trip.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, that's where that rogue wave came. Yeah.
Okay, Dave, why don't you pull us back to the Northern Hemisphere?
Okay, up north. Mongolia.
How about if we include China in that as well? How many people have been to China?
I went to Inner Mongolia. Does that count?
Sure.
It's part of China instead of plain Mongolia, but it was an interesting trip. All you saw was sheep, and all you ate was sheep. So, and I stayed in a tent, or no, they don't call it a tent.
A yurt.
A yurt. It was fun. There were all women but one man, so we were part of his harem, and it was just laughter and a great trip. I enjoyed it.
All right, Steve, you haven't given us a story yet. You got to unmute.
Yeah, I haven't been there, but I have some Mongolian friends. As some of you may know, I'm a volunteer at Arlington Independent Media. And I used to help a couple of Mongolian women who had sort of escaped because one of them's husband had been threatened by the government. Anyway, they were news people in Mongolia, and they are actually still producing a program called I forget it. It's anyway, it has Mongolia in the title. But I ran into them one day at AIM, and they were checking out some video things, and they said, oh, they were going to go do some on the street. And I said, oh, you're just going to go up to people on the street and ask them if they're from Mongolia? That's when I found out that there is actually a large Mongolian community
Mhm,
in Arlington at the southern end of Courthouse Road.
mhm.
Yeah, actually, we had somebody of Mongolian descent talk to us, and she said Northern Virginia has the largest Mongolian population outside of Mongolia anywhere in the world. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Didn't we have a dine around at the Mongolian restaurant? Remember it was in, was it Delray or somewhere? Because their cuisine is kind of a combination of kind of Indian, what you think of Indian, but Chinese too.
That was Nepalese.
Oh, that was Nepalese.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you're standing on the Great Wall of China, aren't you looking into Mongolia on the other side? You can look at the map and let us know, Dave.
Sorry, it doesn't show the Great Wall. I don't think.
You say you can see it from space, Dave. You should be able to make it out.
That's a myth.
No, but I've heard that too. Yeah.
Because
All
it's the
right,
border,
well,
right?
Give us another spin and take us south of the border this time.
South of the border. Okay.
South of the equator, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll tilt towards this hemisphere. We'll keep it random. Well, there's so much water in the southern hemisphere, so that's the Indian Ocean again. But it's the South. Sorry, it's the South Pacific, which includes a lot of islands, including Australia and New Zealand, and lots of other islands.
So who's been to New Zealand? I'm sure we've got a few people.
I've been to New Zealand and I absolutely loved it. I drove on the North Island and took a tour on the South Island because it was, I realized you're missing something if you're driving. So, I mean, you're missing the details. So I can't recommend New Zealand more than any other country I've been to. There's just so much to see, and you don't have to go so far. Gorgeous mountains. It's and a lot of history. It's excellent. So everybody should go.
Okay, I see Nancy, you have your hand up if you want to join in.
I agree. After retirement, my sister and I did a 1-month trip to New Zealand, and we didn't want to miss all the different things you can see. So we joined a travel organization called Stray Travel, straying as if getting off the beaten path. And it was interesting because it was a very wide range of young people on it, as well as, people our age and people from all over the world. And we traveled together for 24 days on that trip, including the Northern Island and the Southern Island, and took a ferry to get across with our bus. And it was just great. This was in, maybe January, February 2019. And, so that's summertime down there because they have the reversal of the seasons. And nice people, wonderful things to see, interesting places to stay, including some that were like dormitories, which, we just dove in and did it with everybody there on this small group trip that could get to places that the bigger tour buses can't go to, including an overnight stay on one of the ships that goes into the, I'm trying to think of what they call them there in Norway. They're considered fjords, but they call them, In New Zealand, they call them something else way down on the southern island, and you're in this incredible water. And some of the young people of our group actually dove in off the boat to go swimming in this ice cold water. And it was really fantastic. I highly recommend New Zealand as well to anybody for a trip.
All right, I see Rita, you've got your hand up. Do you want to share a story? You need to unmute.
Yep, yep. Oh, I've been to both New Zealand and Australia. The most important part is that I had a chance to lecture about Hansen disease, leprosy, because the indigenous people in Australia, that's one of the problems there. So it was very nice to get a chance to share the information.
Okay, Jim, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. I second everybody's comments about how wonderful, beautiful New Zealand is, and, you know, for very many reasons. But I think the highlight of my trip is in Queenstown. I took a helicopter ride to take in all the scenic parts of that area. And we landed on kind of like a mountainside, like a 45-degree angle, which was kind of interesting. So it was a great place.
All right, well, Dave, why don't you take us back north of the equator?
Okay, I will, but I have a little thing to say about New Zealand. I've never been near the place, but after graduate school, our daughter went there on a vacation, actually with Arlene. They went together. And Janine, the daughter, went swimming off of, I think, the North Island, and with dolphins. So to this day, her middle name is Swims with Dolphins, you know, kind of like runs with wolves. So we think about New Zealand a lot. Okay, here we go. Which hemisphere?
Northern.
Okay. Oh, the Aleutian Islands. This is going to be a stretch.
Anybody taking an Alaska cruise?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I want to say something about Alaska and Hawaii. May I do that, Gary? Just quickly. Yeah, we went to Alaska on a kind of a bushwhacking tour, but we also went on whale watching there, Arlene and I, and we saw all these humpback whales, really enormous creatures. And then we went on a similar kind of a adventure cruise to Hawaii, and a lot of those same humpback whales, they migrate to the part of Hawaii that we went to, the waters between Maui and the Big Island and one or two others. And that's where they have their babies. So that Maureen mentioned the connection between Hawaii and Alaska. Well, that's another one, the humpback whales. Those are the two areas where they migrate.
Okay, Carolyn, you've got your hand up.
I've never been to Hawaii, to Alaska, but my father spent his tour of duty when he was in the Army during World War II in Alaska as a young kid, and he spent 2 years driving sled dog teams all around Alaska looking for communists. And he said it was the best time. It was the best time of his life. He said no communists, but they saw everything else.
Pat, Burke, do you want to share your story?
Yeah. Yeah, I took a cruise to Alaska. We did the Inside Passage and stopped in Juneau and God, I can't remember the names of the other small towns where we stopped. But the highlight of that one was taking a helicopter ride up to a glacier for a dog sled run. And it was 50 degrees that day and very warm. And they were talking about moving the dog sled teams off that particular glacier because it was starting to get too mushy. But they took everything up to this glacier by helicopter. The dog houses, the dogs, the dog food, everything. And when they left, they took everything with them except the pee. It was really, really, really interesting. And then we kept looking for wildlife and never could see the seals or the sheep, the all sheep. But another part of that was the glacier. We went, I don't think it was Hubbard Glacier, it was a different one. But it was a beautiful day, and the captain of the cruise ship was so excited, you could hear it in his voice. He could get within like a half a mile of this glacier, and they did, we didn't do the tour boat, but the tour boat took off to get closer to the glacier so people could take close-up pictures. And while they were doing that, and then they started to leave and the glacier calved. And you have to be careful how close you are, because it creates a giant wave, and it could have capsized that little tour boat. But that was just a wonderful, wonderful cruise. I would do it again in a minute.
All right, well, let's do one more before we spin. Maureen, why don't we?
Yeah, can I tell about my time in Alaska? I actually lived in Fairbanks for 4 years. And while I was there, I was working for the Farthest North Girl Scout Council. And in that job, I got to do a lot of traveling, because the main responsibility of my job was to go in and recruit and train Eskimo women to be Girl Scout leaders. And it was just a marvelous experience. And you get to, there's a couple of main towns that you fly to from Fairbanks. So Barrow in the north, which is right on the Arctic Ocean, Kotzebue on the Bering Sea, and you would fly to those places on a regular jet, and then you'd take little planes to get to the villages. And people there, they don't have cars, they have those three-wheeler Hondas, that they ride around on. And when you're in some of those places, one of the places you go to from Kotzebue is called Point Hope. And as you're flying there about an hour, and you're looking down, and the land goes, it's a long, long peninsula, very narrow, and you get to the tip, and that's Point Hope. And 700 people live there. And when you're at Point Hope, you actually can see Russia from your backyard. So that's my story.
Well, Dave, why don't you give us another spin and put your finger down right on the equator somewhere.
Okay. The Democratic Republic of Congo, right in Central Africa.
Okay.
Sub-Saharan, Central Sub-Saharan Africa.
So anybody been to Equatorial Africa? I was gonna say, I spent a couple of weeks in Kenya right after I retired, working at a orphanage and school for kids whose parents had died in the AIDS epidemic. And we went down there to try and teach the faculty how to use computers. Most of them had never seen a computer, had no idea what to do with them. So we loaded up a bunch of used laptops with educational software and went down there for a couple of weeks. Spent the day teaching the teachers, and then spent the night playing with the kids. And this was right on the Ugandan border. So we were way off in the hinterlands, and it was quite an experience. Jim, you have a story?
Yeah, I went to Kenya as well, and Tanzania for the Serengeti migration. I was on a group tour that, was really marvelous, really amazing. A lot of good pictures. And then I once went on business to Uganda and also took a side trip there to one of their national parks to see wildlife. So really good trips.
All right. Anybody else?
I was in Nairobi for 2 years, and luckily, one of the embassy chaps could fly. So he would rent a plane, and we saw we went to Tanzania, or over Tanzania, to see the wildebeest migration, and then we went to the lake, and then I can't remember, in the north west, and not a soul there except those of us on the plane. And we were supposed to be able to take any fish that we caught home with us. And when we got home with our fish, what we had were the fish heads. We had been eating the fish in the little place that we stayed. So anyway, it was an interesting experience. I don't think I ever spent a weekend at home. I took a trip every single weekend to see Kenya. Beautiful. Go.
Okay. Well, Dave, why don't do you have something?
Well, yeah, this was really out of the way, but I never thought I'd go there. But I made a business trip when I was working for the government. I made a trip to Mogadishu, Somalia. Not exactly a tourist haven, but it was on business. And it's a pretty rough place. And then I took a flight, which I'll never forget, from Mogadishu to Cairo, and we could see, it was clear, and we could see the Nile River from almost its origin, although that's just, there are two origins. Anyway, beautiful, austere countryside, mountains, rivers, and desert. It was an amazing flight. Okay, which hemisphere?
Oh, hang on, Cheryl's got her hand up.
Oh,
I was just going to share too, and others who had mentioned that they had been to Tanzania, but it was, and which I absolutely loved, going on a safari and see the Serengeti and that. But I thought it was always interesting. I was telling friends before that my husband and I were going to go to Tanzania, and I always remember her advice, and she said, don't take a picture of the first zebra that you see. And I just thought that was such interesting advice, given the fact that there were many zebras and many different animals in Tanzania. And I think that was the best part of the trip, was to see all of that wildlife up so close and enjoy it. It was a beautiful country.
Did you go to Ngorongoro crater?
Yes.
In Tanzania?
Yes.
That is another must. I just love it.
Absolutely. It was one of my favorite trips.
I
Right.
went there as well.
Yeah.
All right, well, Dave, you want to give us another spin?
yeah, I'm going to head for the good old USA here. Okay.
Okay.
The continental USA. Montana.
Okay.
Well, I went on a ski trip there years ago, and it was really nice. We, the one thing that struck me is the streams there. The water's not clear. They're running so fast. There's a lot of suspended minerals in the water, so they can be turquoise blue, and it's very striking. The other funny thing about it was that on the way from the lodge to the ski area, we would always pass by Jim Neighbor's house. So for those of you that remember Gomer Pyle, that was where he retired to. And we were also there during huckleberry season. So it was huckleberry everything. Huckleberry syrup on your pancakes, huckleberry jam, huckleberry whatever. So, but it was a beautiful place to visit. Maureen, you got something to add?
Well, I've been to and through Montana several times, driving across country, but but the one time I spent any time there, we went to Glacier National Park and we did some hiking there, and you know, the mountainous scenery is just spectacular. And then after we went to Glacier, we actually went up to Canada and went through Banff and Jasper in that area. Gorgeous mountains. So, I mean, we talk about the mountains here in Virginia, and I always have to laugh because I've seen real mountains. Oh, so.
See, Pax and Nancy have their hand up. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One year, one of our sons was out in Montana for an outdoor adventure type thing, and so we went out there to pick him up and stayed out there for several days. And we flew into Spokane and then drove over to where he was in Montana and spent several days. And we really hoped to be able to see the Milky Way because it was sort of a remote area, but it was cloudy the entire time. We were so disappointed that, you know, we didn't have any clear evenings to see the sky. But it was kind of interesting on the way back. They told us there was a scenic route we could take back, and we drove up and we sort of saw it wasn't a main road at all. We drove up there and it was just this winding little one-lane road, switchback right on the edge of the mountain. And Nancy doesn't like heights too well.
It was, I mean, it was beautiful, but it was scary.
Because it was if you went off the side, you were going down. Fortunately, we didn't run anybody coming the other direction. I'm not sure what would have done because there wasn't really room for two cars most of the way. But at one point we stopped and got out just to take a look. And I can't tell you how wonderful it smelled. The pine smell was like you had a pine freshener there in your car, but it was walking outside the car. It was really beautiful.
Okay, Anita, you've got your hand up. You want to share something?
Yeah, I did a Rhodes Scholar trip to Glacier Park. And I recommend Rhodes Scholar this was a great group. There were 3 different guides that you could self-select. And, you know, they broke the group into the people who wanted to go the farther, the faster, the medium group. And then there was my group. And it was the most rigorous hiking I've done, and in the highest altitudes. And there was one day that we were on the bus going to, now I'm going to forget, Iceberg Lake in July. And it was just open because the ice had just come. It was still in the lake, but you could still get up there. And I said, it's going to be a little too far for me, I think. And my friend basically slapped me in the face and said, come on, you're here once, you're going to do it. And it is the best achievement I've had in hiking. And it was well worth it. And then you get back to the great little historic hotel that we stayed at and have a wonderful meal and great friends. And it was a great time.
Okay, well, Dave, see if you can land us somewhere in Europe. We haven't hit that yet.
About time. Bavaria.
Ah. So I was going to say, I'm sure Jim has been there. So why don't you got your hand up first, Jim, so.
Well, Munich is in the heart of Bavaria, and it's a really great place. And it's funny, you know, Munich is famous for its beer halls, beer gardens. And I remember when I was in Berlin one time, and I asked one of the hotel people where I could go to find a beer garden in Berlin, and they were insulted, pointing up the difference in culture between Berlin and Munich. They actually looked down their nose up in Berlin at the Munich people and their beer gardens. At any rate, Munich's a really nice place to visit. I didn't go there during Oktoberfest. I don't like crowds, so I didn't go there then.
Okay, Maureen, want to share something?
Well, the first time I went to Munich was I had been invited to, it was 1980, And I had been invited to speak at a conference that they were having on alternative technology kinds of things in Berlin. And I had never been to Europe before. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna take this opportunity to do some traveling after my week in Berlin. And so I went on my own and I took the train and I went, and I went to see the big, there's a castle in that area in Bavaria. It was just very astounding to me, but it was cold because it was November, and I had was leaving from Seattle, and I had left my winter coat in the upper bin of the plane because I wasn't thinking about it. And so I arrived in Germany in November without a winter coat. So, but what struck me was walking around the streets of how friendly the people were, and that everyone said Guten Morgen, and that there were roses blooming and they had snow on the red roses. And that's a memory that I have, that I remember walking, seeing those roses and being greeted by this very friendly person who was greeting me and wishing me good morning.
All right, Nancy, you've got your hand up. If you want.
Yeah, briefly, 2 summers in Bavaria. The first one, 1973. I wanted to get to Europe, had no money, so I found a volunteer for room and board job outside Innsbruck, Austria, working for an organization called Aufbauwerk der Jugend. And we were taking care of kids living in a big house. They were brought down from inner cities in northern Germany to experience the beauty of the alpine area there in Bavaria. And I learned some German. And then 7 years later, 1980, outside Nuremberg, Germany, my youngest brother and sister, they were 17 and 18 years old at the time. I was 25. I think my parents got sick of them here in the DMV area and sent them over to me for the summer. And we worked in a toy factory in Fürth, Germany, when we were on the line, one of the traditional factories like you see in I Love Lucy, where they're on the line and things keep coming rapidly. We were building toys for Milton Bradley, actually. And we lived in a tent, in the campground that's right near the marching grounds that the Nazis used in World War II. And by the end of that second summer, via immersion from 1973 and 1980, my German was the best I ever got in any language. And I never studied it formally in school, but it just proved to me how well immersion works. That's it.
Did I add something, Gary?
Sure.
In Bavaria and another part of nearby Germany, there's something called the Romantikstrasse, and it's a really beautiful drive that starts in Würzburg and goes through other places like Rothenburg. It kind of ends in Heidelberg, but it's a wonderful itinerary for someone to follow along for a nice vacation in Bavaria.
Okay, let's see, Nancy and Pax have their hand up.
Yeah, we did one of those right before COVID, thank goodness, but we did one of those river cruises that goes the Danube, and it stops, well, a number of places, but Regensburg is interesting. That's a medieval town. And then it at that time, that particular one ended in Nuremberg, which is, kind of interesting, but kind of intense, I think, of everything that, kind of happened there, whatever. But one of the funny things, you're talking about German, which I don't speak, but they had a little contest. You know how they put whole paragraphs together into one word? And it's just funny. So as you walked around the city, and I don't really remember which city, they'd say, let's see who can find the longest word, and there were some long ones. It always stuck in my mind. It was really funny, but that's a beautiful area.
All right, well, we're closing in on 11 o'clock, so I thought maybe we'd wrap it up by having anybody who's got an interesting trip coming up. We've already heard about Lori's trip to Iceland. I'll be spending the last 2 weeks of July hiking in the Cotswolds in England. So that's my that's why I won't be here those two Wednesdays. Anybody
Well,
else?
I can only do one Wednesday. We're gonna be in England and doing, taking a side trip to the Cotswolds.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you there. Anita?
I'm going to Scandinavia for pretty much the month of August, and it is I think the highlight's going to be Norway. I've been accumulating a lot of itineraries from friends like David and Arlene and other people who have been, and looking forward to Norway a lot. But I am going on a family pilgrimage in Sweden where all 4 grandparents came from. And I've been working on this since last year, and I've discovered cousins that on my mother's side that we have never met. Seen a picture of my grandfather from Sweden, the very first time I've seen that picture. And that's going to be kind of who knows what, but the people that I'm going to see on my mother's side are very excited about meeting us, and I hope it's all going to go well.
Cool.
All right, Maureen, you want to have the last word here?
Okay, well, you know that Arlington Neighborhood Village is a member of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce now. And the Chamber of Commerce is sponsoring a trip to Vietnam in November. And I saw that and I thought, well, that would be really interesting to do. And it might be fun to travel with a group of people from Arlington. So in November, I'm going to Vietnam. So I'll have some place to say that I've been in Southeast Asia.
Cool.
All right, well, I'm going to stop recording.